I had a quick question,
Sure.
if that's okay. So I actually got forwarded the meeting invite from a neighbor of mine. My name is Mark Honsuras.
Yes.
So my neighbor, he had actually forwarded to me. I actually live on Oleander Drive, and
Yes.
he recommended attending. So one, I just wanted to make sure it was okay to be here.
Yes, we welcome everyone to participate. So thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and start, and then I'll start the meeting for sure. I really do appreciate you being here. It is 6:07 p.m. and as I stated earlier, we are recording this meeting and it will be posted on the website at PCPB.net. It's our YouTube channel. And so we do have a few visitors here today, and I'm so grateful that we have people showing up to participate. But we've got to take care of some admin business for some parliamentary business. So if you'll just stand back until we take care of that, and then we'll start going through the action items and have an opportunity for non-agenda public comment, which I think would be a great time for you to speak up at that time, Mark.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we have everyone in attendance here. I don't see Tina yet, so I'll be looking out for the waiting room to see if we have any more participants. But the meeting has been called to order. I'd like to take this time to have everyone review the meeting minutes from November. I did place some in the chat. You can take that moment to review that, and a motion to approve would be appreciated if there are no amendments.
Mandy, I don't see him in the chat. Can you repost?
Yes, I can, but I did. Maybe if you had come
it's right above Matt's post.
Yeah. She may have joined the meeting a little later though, so that might have hindered that. Okay, try it again.
Since we've previously reviewed,
yes.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay. I apologize. I'm having issues with this really quick. So Margaret, there's a motion on the floor for Margaret.
I'll second.
And Robert seconds. Okay. Okay, and all in favor, raise of hands.
Am I a voting member?
You are a voting member, yes.
Okay.
All right, so it goes for approval. All right, awesome. Thank you. Margaret was first, Robert was second. All right, perfect. The next order of business we have is we need to go to non-agenda public comment. And as I said earlier, we have some guests here. So if you'd like to speak at this point, you're more than welcome to. Mark, to discuss your issue that you wanted to bring to our attention.
Sure. First of all, pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you for having me. Really do appreciate it. So just my initial comments were, like I stated before, so my neighbor recommended, he forwarded the invite and recommended I attend. I guess the only comments or mainly questions that I have. So as I previously said, I live in the Point Loma area on Oleander Drive. And there's some initial concerns, especially within the neighborhood of two things. One, the road condition, but then also for some reason in this area, all the street lights are out, and they've been out, I want to say, for like the last 4 months. So, I mean, if you're walking, along the area, in some spaces, it's completely pitch black. I mean, it's dark. But going back, probably the biggest concern, and the lights are adding to it, is it's the road conditions. I've lived in the area for about 4 years. End up walking a lot around the neighborhood, usually taking my dog various times of the day, but The road conditions specifically on Oleander Drive they've just deteriorated dramatically. I want to say probably specifically over the last 3 years. I understand the city has a process where you could submit a report. I think the initial step is to submit a report on the Get It Done app.
Mhm.
And honestly, I've probably submitted over 100. I would be shocked if it's double that, over 200 reports. And the feedback or the updates that I've been getting is I understand that this area is scheduled to get the utilities moved underground.
Okay.
And because of that, there's nothing, from what my understanding, there's not really nothing that can be done for the road condition. I've tried to inquire when that project may start, and from what I've been told, I may have been asking in the right areas, it's not even on the schedule yet. So, I mean, it's realistic that, the roads could stay like that for the next, I don't know, 3 to 4 years.
Have you reported the lights being out too on the Get It Done app?
Oh, I have.
'Cause, I've done that for people up by Point Loma High School where they've had the same chronic problem, and sometimes that's successful.
Okay. No, I have.
Yeah.
I kid you not, I've submitted, I want to say at least 30 or 40 reports. And it's, you go onto your app, you take a picture of the light of the entire area of the lights being out.
Right.
Well, I do appreciate you bringing this concern. I can definitely put it onto our list. I was going to
Okay.
ask, what steps you had taken for getting it done through the Get It Done app, because that seems to be the first course of action. But we can definitely, make a request to the city if that's necessary, even if
Okay.
it's in the form of an email. If you would like to,
So I've done the email. I've reached out to actually a number of different people. This last one was to Jennifer Campbell in her office.
okay, yes, she's our
So
city
I-
council member.
Okay, so I've done that, and that's kind of how I got some, I guess, back information in terms of knowing that at some point the utilities are going to move in this area. They're slated to move underground, and because of that, I think the city has a rule that they can't. Essentially, they can't do any work, resurface the road or anything if a project is scheduled within the next, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, 3 to 5 years. So
Okay.
because we're slated to move the utilities under, they won't touch the road until that project is done. So then it kind of led me to, okay, well, when are we scheduled? It's not even on the schedule yet. And even if they put us on the schedule, it could be another 1 to 2 years before they start.
Okay.
So
Well,
kind of what got me going on this route is, obviously the safety of the road, but, we have like a number of kids in the area that are walking up and down. We have a number of elderly in the area that, if you're walking at night, you're not paying attention. The neighbor that actually forwarded me this invite, his mom ended up falling the other night on the road when she was walking to her car.
Well, I definitely am aware of the infrastructure issues within our community, and it's not just your street that's specific. It seems to be rampant all over.
Okay.
But if you can put your information in the chat, we can email
Sure,
the
yeah.
city and see if there's an opportunity for us to advocate for that and expedite your request. I do see some hands in the chat. I don't know who went first, Margaret or Paul, but did you want to comment on this topic specifically?
I did, and
Go ahead.
And my original conversation was with the Mr. Matt Silva. He's the one
That's
that
him.
contacted me via email a couple weeks ago, actually, in moving forward with the next steps. I most definitely said it sounds like it's a community effort at this point, and I would encourage you to work together as a neighborhood. He stated that today, he couldn't make it today, but that he was going to express this meeting to neighbors, which I think is yourself, Mark, and quite a few others as well that have emailed me since then. Coming to the PCPB committee like this does help. We do submit priorities, a priority list for each neighborhood. It sounds from Mr. Silva that there is quite a bit of different issues on that street in that area. So I know we can most certainly take care of a few of those right off the bat, especially the safety measures of it, because he did express quite a bit of recent incidents in that area. So I would encourage that this committee somehow, some way look at this, and I'd like to propose some action eventually down the line to support these neighbors in this neighborhood, because it is more than 2 or 3 neighbors complaining about this street. So that's where I directed Mr. Silva to come with his neighbors, was here, so that we can kind of be a group to support them in their fight. As we know, being on the PCPB board, many of us for many years, and working with the city at this point, that it does take a community effort through the Get It Done app, but then in addition to support from your local community boards. So I'd like to see both done. Encourage your neighbors to report the issues on Get It Done, but then get some support from our committee, which we, report our suggestions to the city. So I hope that helps, and I encourage you to stay positive. And they do say 2 years, but some of the basic stuff we can definitely bring attention to immediately if we help you out and suggest some of the stuff. So
Thank you, Margaret.
helps.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. And actually, Matt, who we just spoke about, was the one that forwarded me the invite. He's actually out on, I think he's on travel with work, so he couldn't be here tonight. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the comments. I appreciate it.
And I think also letting the city know that somebody was injured, sometimes that will ring a louder bell for liability with them.
Okay.
I would.
And actually, it was his mom. That was the one.
Yeah,
that
I mean, it's unacceptable. So if they think there's liability issues, that might speed things up.
Thank you. Paul, you had a question?
Not a question, but a comment for context. The undergrounding in this city has been something just short of a scandal. The money is sitting there in a huge pot of money, and the city's doing nothing. SDG&E is doing nothing to prioritize streets or neighborhoods. It's almost, like I said, just short of a scandal. In terms of the road conditions and the street lights, the street light issue is a big issue citywide, as are street conditions. And I'm wondering if we couldn't, at our next planning board meeting, ask Corla to raise this as really a citywide issue at CPC. And maybe we can put what weight the planning boards have, which I realize is not a lot, all the planning boards have together to accelerate some activity on all these fronts. Streetlights, I mean, there's been some on Voltaire that have been down for 2 years. I know in La Jolla Shores, people are complaining there, and if La Jolla Shores streetlights aren't getting fixed, we know ours aren't going to be. And finally, with the Get It Done app, one of the things that I've learned, if you put in multiple Get It Done app requests for the same thing, they take the duplicates and they just close them out. Mm-hmm. So putting in 200 is next to meaningless.
Okay, that's good information, Paul. I wasn't sure, if more created more activity on any given issue that they were bringing to the city's attention. But I definitely think, bringing the city issue, the safety issue is going to be maybe an eye opener for sure. But I do agree with you. Let's, again, being that this is a traffic safety, I'd like to have opportunity to take it up under the subcommittee, but I don't see any harm in asking Corla to bring this issue towards the CPC, because a lot of the issues we're dealing with in our communities are also being dealt with other neighborhoods nearby. And that is a quick fix, something that would definitely benefit public safety on our streets.
Yeah. And rather than competing against other communities, we should present a united front with other communities.
I agree. I think it would address a citywide issue. Thank you, Paul. Delana?
Just kind of going along with that same thing, I was going to ask, along with what I think it's Paul just said, and then in support of what Mark just said, ask the CPC for some more transparency from the city, some sort of what order are things being done in, and what's, instead of just, you're not up yet, have them be able to post a list of projects that are coming up so we at least know. That should be, that could, I think, go along with what other people have just said about trying to get these issues handled. And again, citywide, because we realize there's problems everywhere.
All right, I think that's a great recommendation. And again, finding out where the schedule is. So if there is a maintenance plan to remedy that and fix these, that, you know, the public is aware of what that schedule is so that we know when that's going to come around the corner. Great recommendations, everyone. Are there any other hands I did not see?
I just recall it was after Byron Ware was in the council that they stopped giving any projected scheduling on any of that underground stuff.
Oh, that's a long time. Okay.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think either regardless, you know, I think it's something we can bring up, have CPC, you know, possibly have Corla advocate for that with the CPC. But I definitely would like to bring this issue to the attention of the Traffic and Transportation Subcommittee and see if we can provide relief to the community and get that fixed. So again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dave, for being here. I'm very grateful. You're more than welcome to stay on with everything else, but we're moving on to our next part of our meeting.
Thank you all. Yeah, I do appreciate all your time and thank you for everything that you guys are doing. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, thank you for getting involved.
Excuse me, Mandy, Tina's trying to get in.
Oh, is she?
Are we gonna say happy birthday?
We can. Can you ask
Oh,
her?
no, that's okay. It's being
I don't
recorded.
see her. I've not been seeing anything.
Okay, it's all right.
Are you sure? Okay. All right. No, I don't see her in the waiting room.
Okay,
And
I'll
I
let her
haven't
know.
been.
I'll text
Okay.
her.
All right. Let's move on to our first action item. We have Glenn Volk here. He's a neighbor that lives at Sunset Cliffs. And we also have Delana. She lives along Sunset Cliffs right behind Glenn. And I met with the both of them at the end of last year. And I want to, we want to bring this action item to the planning board as a discussion, as an action item here tonight to discuss what mitigations would be appropriate to request. I have a list of some ideas that he has recommended and that I felt were appropriate that we can bring up. But I'd like to invite Glenn to, basically, Glenn lives on Sunset Cliffs. We're all aware of the Sunset Cliffs issues. During the day, we have lots of tourists and local community members who love to watch the sunset through all times of the day. They like walking and enjoying the park throughout the day. Well, what happens at night is the cover of darkness provides a lot of issues for the community members. What Glenn has been experiencing is that he has banners or people coming to park along the street at nighttime. They show up at all hours of the night and they stay there. And these are not homeless individuals. These are people here wanting an experience. And they are parking in front of the homes along Sunset Cliffs and in all of the streets around that area. This is a known issue. And they are disturbing the peace. And we've done a little research. We're working, I reached out to the Western Division to find out some information. And one of the thoughts is that we would request to have signage installed on existing posts, so there would be no digging. But it would still need, eventually, any recommendation that we make in the form of a parking restriction would need to be approved eventually by the Coastal Commission. And so this, anything that we do here, if we do make a recommendation for a restriction, this is just, again, shooting our shot across the bow, getting the, getting everything in motion to eventually get to the Coastal Commission if we are able to approve that through our board. And so I do have a map that I've provided, as well as pictures of some of the vehicles that he's been finding out in front of his home. But before we do that, I wanted to go ahead and open the floor. He's joined us tonight, and I'd like him to speak on his experience and just share with our group what's happening in front of his in his neighborhood. Glenn?
Did this work? Can everybody hear me?
I can hear
Okay.
you. You have the floor.
Okay. So there's two different things that go on Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. And I want to try and make that really, there's actually three different things that go on Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. First, there's very little in the way of what I would call homeless people sleeping on our streets here. I'm not walking outside. I get up at 4:30 or 5 every morning, and I'm not walking outside and finding somebody curled up in the driver's seat of a Toyota Camry with all their belongings packed up in the front and back seat. Those aren't the people that I'm finding here. So this is not an issue of homelessness, and this is not a bag on the homelessness at all. Okay, so I just want to clear that right out of the chute. This is about the folks that have chosen to live in a vehicle, whether it's a RV or a van, usually a Sprinter or something like that, and enjoying the free life of being able to just cruise around and not have any responsibilities and live in a vehicle and sleep in people's neighborhoods. I will say that along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, whether from the I believe it's the 1300 block all the way down to the 700 block along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, every morning, if you cruise that street at 5 a.m., you'll find a number of vans or RVs that have parked in different spots along the street. And none of us is comfortable with people habitating in their vehicles on our streets. And the city of San Diego repealed, once again, temporarily repealed the vehicle habitation ordinance because if you go back to, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit. In 2017, there was a lawsuit filed by homeless advocates to repeal the vehicle habitation ordinance. And in 2019, many of us in the neighborhood rose up against that premise and got the mayor and the city attorney to draft an ordinance that would stand the scrutiny of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and put the VHO back in place, which they did, and make it illegal to sleep in vehicles within 500 feet of a residence. Then COVID hit, and the city council, because they said, well, COVID's here, so we can't enforce these laws anymore. And that law, along with many other laws, kind of went out the window for the last couple of years. A few months ago, I was told that the city was going to start enforcing the VHO again because the pandemic was nearing its end, but that didn't really happen. What ended up happening was there was an amendment to the lawsuit filed in 2017, and then the city decided not to enforce the VHO anymore until that case could be heard in court, which is scheduled for October of 2022. What several of us have found after some digging, and there's two different potential stories here. Either Todd Gloria and the mayor's office told the police not to enforce the VHO until the lawsuit was determined, or the city attorney told the police not to enforce it because of the risk of lawsuits. I've been told by my contacts in the city attorney's office that it did not come from them, which means it had to have come from Todd Gloria's office. So now the police are not enforcing the VHO. And as a result, we're starting to see the numbers of people sleeping in their vehicles in our neighborhoods starting to creep up. Now, it's just not just Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, but Cordova Street, Cornish, Ladera, Froud, Rizzo, all of them. That's one thing. The other thing that happens along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, and this doesn't have anything to do with the van lifers. It has to do with people who decide they're going to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. The bars have just closed. They haven't had enough of a good time, so they come along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard and start to yak it up and party and whatever. Doesn't happen a lot, but it happens sometimes. So Dandy has led the charge here on trying to curtail parking along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard between the hours of, I don't know what you're trying right now, 10 a.m. to 5 a.m. maybe, which would, since the VHO is not being enforced, this is another way to try to lessen the impact of the VHO offenders and the partiers. It doesn't do anything for the VHO offenders on other streets. And that's another matter that we have to fight in another battle, but that's what this is about. And I believe there's also a call along the corner at Ladera and Sunset Cliffs Boulevard to expand the red zone area to make it easier for emergency vehicles to make the turn there, which probably needs to be done. It's pretty tight when those guys come around. If they were in a hurry, they might be bottlenecked pretty badly. So that's what our battle is right now, I guess, if you will. And it all leads towards nuisance law enforcement. I mean, all of this is all related to the fact that this city no longer wants to enforce nuisance laws. And we're just trying to find ways to create the opportunity for the police to ticket people for parking illegally overnight in their vans. And that's all I have to say about it. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Glenn, is that your home that has all the floodlights about 3 or 4 doors down from Ladera? Or who is that?
Yep, that's me.
Okay. Now I would think that would be effective on keeping people away from the frontage. Is that?
Well, it's pretty effective on keeping them away from my house.
Right.
But it doesn't help the people to the left and the right of me.
I
And I will
hear
tell you, I've gone to all of my neighbors in this block. They've all of them to a person have said, this is really cool. We're glad you're doing it. But I've gone to all of them and said, you guys ought to put these lights in because there's nobody across the street to bother but the fish. And nobody's done it. So yeah, I when people park along the street now, they kind of go to the left or they go to the right. Although I will tell you, there's been 2 or 3 masochists that have decided to park right in front of my house, but it's pretty rare.
Okay.
Glenn, when people are there late at night, does anybody ever call the police when they're making a lot of noise?
Well, why? I mean, the reality is that I will tell you this. It generally doesn't happen for a very long period of time. And generally I just close my slider and then I don't worry about it. But I mean, other neighbors of mine, you know, they don't have the same kind of, when we put tons of insulation in this house, noise insulation and that sort of thing, because I knew that was an issue. So I can get away from it, but our neighbors can't. Calling the police on something like that, you know, the chances of the police showing up within a period of time where those people would still be there are really rare. So no, calling the police to me is pretty ineffective. I think that the effective cure is a big fat no parking sign along the street. I don't really believe they'll be driven to the other side of the street. Most people, they want to park along the ocean. If they can't park along the ocean, they're going to leave. They're not going to park on my side of the street. I don't think, at least most of them won't, especially not in my lights. But the reality is that, you know, by putting up no parking signs along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, you know, at least along the west side, I'd love to have it on both sides because none of us park on the street. But I think that would be a help. And it's just a way to lessen the impact of the lack of enforcement of nuisance laws in this city. I mean, that's a whole nother argument. I won't get into it right now, but that's what we're trying for.
Thank you. As he was speaking, I did go through, Glenn has provided me with, you know, images and pictures of the types of people that are, you know, coming and parking in front of his vehicle, you know, in front of his home. And as, you know, he stated, again, this is not an issue of us trying to displace homeless people or move them out of the area. This is people who are choosing to have this experience and are coming into the neighborhood in the darkness of night and disturbing the peace. And so I'd like to open up the floor for other discussion, but I'd like to maybe talk about some of the possible solutions that we could bring in the form of a remedy to our neighbor here. The first one being, I have a map up here. And the first one would be, you see the red dots here. There would be a request to have the blue and white municipal code signs that basically tell people what not to do. And, you know, they're blue and white, they're ordinance signs. I'd like to see those placed along the Sunset Cliffs and the Ladera area to educate the community about the rules of the park, especially people tend, you know, they're walking in from all different angles, and along Sunset Cliffs, I feel like that and along Ladera would allow ample opportunities for people to see those signs and to know what the rules are. The second issue is the striping here. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, the turn at Ladera, when you turn from Sunset Cliffs up Ladera, that turn is very narrow, and the double yellow, the fire department does have issues sometimes transiting that area due to the parking that's happening along that corner. And so due to the, you know, the response at the parks for rescues, it was recommended that we can red stripe and expand the striping along that corner on both sides to help allow a safer transit around that corner. There is on Ladera, the striping was requested for both sides of the corner of the street at the corner, because there is also a fire hydrant that's close to the alley there along Ladera, and people are parking in front of it as well, and they'd like to have striping to expand it to allow more visibility and more space should the fire emergency personnel need to access that fire hydrant. As you can see as well is I'm going to request, one of the other issues is with these vanners is they are dumping their sewage down our storm drains, and they are dumping it into the park trash receptacles, quite a bit of trash. And so what ends up happening is the amount of trash that's there cannot be serviced, and it ends up in our oceans. And the request along Ladera, right in between Carmelo, or sorry, along Sunset Cliffs in between Ladera and Carmelo, there's a storm drain there that is needing to expand the striping as well, because there's been several instances of these vanners dumping their raw sewage down that drain. And the thought is if we expand the striping on both sides, it would help promote visibility of that drain. And hopefully, you know, that would encourage, it would just, you know, it would discourage people from doing that practice. And that has a whole, that's health, environmental issues that need to be addressed. And then on the map, you can see, as we've here, you know, with parking issues, obviously the Coastal Commission will need to get involved to get, you know, the final say so. But I'd also like to request that the city review permit parking for this area, especially where I have it mapped off is from Point Loma Avenue to Ladera, and then I have it going up just this area around the park and around openings, other properties and streets that have openings to Sunset Cliffs Park. And again, this is, I am a member of the Sunset Cliffs Natural Park Council, and so is Delana. And for years, even before the pandemic, we have, this neighborhood has a lot of issues with regards to the egress from people wanting to watch the sunset. But darkness again brings a cover for people who are not being respectful, or it just creates issues where people, there's really no reason in my mind that I can see anyone other than the neighbors needing to be in that area after 10 o'clock at night. And so the thought was to request the parking not be allowed during 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. or 4 a.m., whichever, 4 or 5. We don't want to limit the access of surfers or people who do want to frequent the park, you know, to walk or along that area. So we're thinking, you know, 5 o'clock in the morning would be a good time to allow people to come back into the area with the sun coming up, and that would help you know, allow for people to come visit during those hours. Now, the permit parking, again, that's a program that the city offers, and that would also allow for permit street parking, and it would give the neighbors another tool to ensure that the people that are parking on their streets at night are visitors, and as well, it would help alleviate some of these disturbing of the peace issues that are coming with that. And as well, I would like to request more enforcement of the area. Sunset Cliffs is, as what I've last heard, is the third most visited place here in San Diego, behind the zoo and SeaWorld. And we need to have more support for the community members that are living there. Those are my opinions, and that's what I'd like to see potentially requested as some tools to help the neighbors. I'd like to open up to the floor for suggestions and recommendations from the group. So I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay.
I would just say, don't make it huge where they can't digest it. I mean, you're going to have to get law enforcement that's going to have to enforce, or meter maids, or maybe some volunteer police people. Maybe but they're not really out at night. But, the parking, the permit parking thing, I know is a pretty daunting task, because you have to get all these signatures and it takes a long time. But I would just be real targeted about it and don't give too many suggestions where it gets, lost in the pile.
Thank you, Robert. Who was Angela or Matt? Who was, sorry. Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, well, I was looking to see a list of all the other, park closures or streets curfews. And I noticed a lot were 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., midnight to 4 a.m. So I don't know if 10 to 4 would be the best.
Are those parks near residential homes right across the street? I doubt it.
Let me look.
Let's see.
Like look Kate Sessions up maybe.
Oh,
Kate
yeah.
Sessions,
Right.
Yeah, I looked at Kate Sessions. Kate Sessions is 11. Starts at 11.
Kate Sessions fought that curfew years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just
Anyway, there's
looking-
just a whole list already.
There it is.
being implemented.
Let me pull it up. I have it right here. Okay, closure. Oh, sorry. No, I'm looking up at the memo for okay, here it is. So yeah, I see 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Listed there. I do see 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. for the South Mission Beach. But it looks like the no parking from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. for the lots that are along Sunset Cliffs are there. So I think my recommendation would be potentially, and then the Sunset Cliffs, that lot is 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And I think that's why we had discussed that, because I don't want to just have people move from one spot to the next. And so if that would be best, we could, to have continuity, we could do 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. perhaps. I just worry that 2 a.m., that small time frame of 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. is not going to provide Glenn the relief that he needs,
I think
for
that's
people.
too short. Yeah, I agree. I think that's too short, but I don't know if 10 p.m. is quite not late enough,
Okay. Glenn, I see your hand. Let's have Matt go and then Margaret. Apologies for, if I did anything out of order, and then Glenn will go after that.
I believe Delana had her hand up before me, so I would
she
yield
did?
to her
Okay.
if she wants.
Go ahead, Delana.
I don't care what order we go in. What I would also really like to have the PCB, whatever it is, the most support is law enforcement along the cliffs. One of the things that angers me is that the city went out of its way to enact new laws so they could clean up problems along Pacific Beach, Mission Beach, South Mission Beach, and then the bay along those areas. You used to be able to drink at beaches until people decided that that was too much of a problem. So new laws were enacted. We're only asking enforce the laws that currently exist, other than some new parking restrictions. And it really is very sad that we don't get the law enforcement support we need. 5,000 Newport gets a lot of it. Fiesta Island gets a lot of it. Mission Bay, a lot of those places, and signs have now gone up restricting camping in your vehicle. And they have moved those campers along, and they have moved them specifically to Western Division and Ocean Beach, specifically Robb Field and Sunset Cliffs. They've done a lot to clean out even the parking lots at the west end of Altair Street, west end of Brighton. All of that stuff has been really cleaned up, and they have dumped them in our residential neighborhood. And so, along with some parking restrictions, the most important thing is to really come down hard, and the mayor, the city council, et cetera, for truly abandoning us as far as law enforcement goes. So that's my big thing. And for those of you who don't know me, I've introduced myself before. I spent 30 years as a San Diego police officer, and we had neighborhood issues and knew how to come in and help control these issues. And it's very, very frustrating now, not being a part of being able to be part of the solution. So for everybody who's supporting all of this, thank you very much for your time and effort.
Thank you, Delana. Nat, were you next?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a couple points.
Sure.
So it seems like we have kind of multiple problems here. You know, on one hand is the one related to vehicles parked in areas that sound like they might be causing disturbances.
Mhm.
So that seems like one problem. You know, where are vehicles parked, and how we want to address that, I think, can be through you know, parking enforcement. And then the other problem that you brought up, Mandy, sounded like it sounded like some were kind of wrapped into one, which was, you know, like if there's vehicles dumping down storm drains, like I think that's a serious problem, but that's probably a separate thing we want to bring up separately. I think the solutions to that would probably be different. You know, it seems like expanding the red curb might not be the best suggestion to the city for how to deal with that. But if we bring it to their attention that that could be a problem, they might have something else in mind. So I would, going back to the problem about parking, I don't think this is probably the best area to propose something like residential parking kind of permitting. I'm thinking back to when I used to work at the Hillcrest Hospital, and you know they have a lot of permitted parking there. You have an impacted situation of lots of medical staff and patients looking for parking in a neighborhood that's substantially older than car culture. So there aren't a lot of driveways and off-street parking. As Glenn mentioned earlier, it sounds like him and most of his neighbors aren't parking on the street. So at one point, I believe Glenn said he would be in support of something like a no parking on like the west side of the street or something like that. So I think those might be some of the solutions we could look at that are being brought forth by some of the residences on like some of the people who are living on that corridor, if that makes sense. That might be what I want to prioritize as a board.
Sure, I agree. I know that there's a lot of recommendations in that, and I do agree, like we can piece these out, and I can, bullet it out for sure to keep it organized. But, if we wanted to parse this out, and make it two separate requests, I just wanted to look at it on a holistic level and have one document. Here's the striping, here's what we're asking for signage along this area, and then leave like the permit parking and what they're able to get up to the city. Just make a recommendation to review that area for permit parking. And, if that's feasible, then they can pursue that. But again, I'm not like putting any parameters around what the permit parking will be or what the hours are. I think
I understand what you're saying. And I think I think it's a good idea to talk about all of these holistically as a conversation and
Mhm.
discussion. I think in terms of what action we take, we might want to split it into separate letters. One to address parking, one to address striping. Just based on feedback we've got from people at the city before, like when, we've proposed some of these long multi-paragraph letters, some of the feedback has been, if we can keep them more simple and direct, that it's just one city department will handle it, because like some of the striping gets into fire and storm drain
Mhm.
issues as opposed to some of the parking kind of regulation. So I think the more we can keep those separate as, hey, here are problems, here's some solutions we want to propose to this particular problem. And then we could have multiple letters if need be.
Okay. I
and
like
so-
that. I think that could be doable. I mean, they would all be approved today. We just parse out each individual department based on what our request is. that we
Right.
approve.
And then just the last thing I wanted to say, in terms of what I think suggestions we throw out for the city to consider, I would be in favor of not including the residential parking permit. And I would be in favor of exploring more options about limited parking, either just, like it's been proposed, like blanket no parking on the west side, or, getting timed parking, no parking between hours aligned with maybe some of the parking lots in other parks. So.
Okay, that's a great recommendation. Yeah, I can see, rather as opposed to permit parking, just do like timed park, have if we decide on 10 to 4, have it throughout all those streets as opposed to permit parking. Is that what you were recommending, or have it on one side of the street?
At least along Sunset Cliffs, like that corridor.
Okay.
I mean, if we want to expand it into some of the other, into some of what had been proposed for permitted parking, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I'd want to perhaps get some more community feedback from people further away from the coast before we.
Yeah, and again, this is just a recommendation. This is not the final say. So even this request for signage is not the final say so, because any parking restriction has to go before the Coastal Commission to get approved. And so again, it's, this would not be final. Thank you, Matt. Margaret?
Yeah, I thank you for your service, Delana. I appreciate it. I have been working religiously within the different communities, even coastal here in San Diego, all the different issues and needs of just Western Division PD. And I can tell you right off the bat, Sunset Cliffs isn't going to be a priority. And right now we're actually having a meeting on Friday with Officer Cerullo and a couple other officers in regards to the demand and need of District 2 and coverage for all the different communities that they manage. We really have to hone in on the central problem and not just do multiple letters. I get where Matt was coming from and I respect it. And I think it's a great idea, but we really have to see what other communities that also have dangerous cliffs eroding and falling, what they're doing right now. I know I used to work up in Encinitas about 2 years ago, and their communities were really putting their foot down with short curfews and what people can and can't do near the cliffs. I don't think anyone's bringing that up of how dangerous these Sunset Cliffs are, man. Like, I wouldn't even make any pedestrian walkways or parking lots in that area. It is so freaking dangerous. I think looking at the big picture of this being a coastal community with some really problematic issues, just in general, the cliffs. I know if we look at some of those big pictures of what other communities have done and have been successful, doesn't always have to be Point Loma, Mission Beach. I mean, there are some high dangerous areas that have the similar issues up along the coast, the 101. Those neighbors had major issues. If you've ever driven on, Encinitas, Cardiff area, there's beautiful homes right there. And they had the same issues, people partying right in front of their homes, parking overnight. They had the whole van issue. I'm thankful enough to be attending a lot of these meetings where I can hear the reality of the help that you're going to get. Sunset Cliffs has been fighting this for so many years. I'm a native of Point Loma. It's been years. I'm so appreciative that there hasn't been, the neighbors giving up. It's just honing down to the reality of what you're going to get help wise from PD, from the city, and just, I don't know what you need to do, but get OB involved, Point Loma involved, all the different groups that could really stand together to get, the mayor involved. Right now, I can tell you Western PD is focused on the Midway District. You can't even drive down Homeless City near Big Lots. It's really concerning. It's dangerous. There is like 70% crime right now in Point Loma in that area that they can't even have a hold on. So let's really focus in on what we want done for Sunset Cliffs. It's dangerous. It's, let's look at long-term. I mean, are they just waiting for someone, to fall off those cliffs? I mean, I walk down Sunset Cliffs quite a bit, but I take the back routes because it's just not safe anymore. And so we've got to, really pinpoint to the city that this isn't going to be around for a while for all these people to park up and party all night. And there's got to be some boundaries, and they've got to be early. So that's my 2 cents from listening to all the coastal communities and District 2 communities of what they've got going on as well. So hang in there and fight. I'm totally into support, but let's really do it the right way and win this battle.
Thank you, Margaret. The next, Paul. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I just want to caution asking for a permit district. I lived in Hillcrest near University Medical Center for a time back in about 1980. And we had a permit parking district there. It was a miserable experience living there. You have to go down every year and apply for a permit. Your friends can't come and visit you because you don't have permits for them to park there. It's not a great solution. It seemed like a good solution, but it is not a pleasant experience for the people who live in them.
I know that there's extra steps, to obtaining that permit. And back to earlier, Glenn is right. A lot of the neighbors don't park on the street because they have ample space to park. We could, just ask the city to look at it. And then in the meantime, look more for like parking restrictions, like what Matt had mentioned, throughout those, streets all in that blue area to look at which ones would be most appropriate to install that signage so that there is some way for the neighbors to enforce, no parking at certain times of the night. Glenn, what are your thoughts on that? Would you be okay with, do you think the permit parking is a no deal, or would signage with the parking restrictions on the other streets nearby be helpful?
To me, permit parking is really important in an area that's impacted by a lack of parking. You can't really say that Sunset Cliffs has a parking problem because there's always open parking someplace. I know that in Lower OB near the beach, parking's super impacted there.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a place where parking permits make sense to me, that's the place.
Okay.
Because I can't imagine being a guy getting home from work at 9 o'clock at night, and I got to park 4 blocks from my house because I can't find a parking space. And I don't know if the parking's impacted by the van lifers or by just the residents. I mean, I've never done a study, so I can't say for sure. But to me, that might be where permit parking is more appropriate. Our problem really is with the lack of enforcement of the VHO. You have van lifers sleeping within the neighborhood. And going out and getting permit parking to try to thwart that problem, to me, is the wrong way to do it. What really ought to happen is proactive enforcement by the police who are on patrol. Police used to actually drive through neighborhoods all the time and look for things that were amiss. And that's really what they ought to be doing. I'm not saying that permit parking is a no-go. I'm just saying it might not be the first go. And the other thing that I wanted to do was comment on what Angela had said, which was wondering whether or not 10 o'clock's too early or not to start no parking along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. I should say along our linear park and parking lots. I don't think 10 o'clock's too early. The reality is that anybody who's out there after, let me just say this. If somebody wants to pull up at midnight and enjoy the sound of the ocean in the night and sit in their car and be quiet, I could care less about that guy. The problem is that we have to dumb this down to the idiot that decides that he wants to show up at 10 o'clock at night or 10:30 at night or 10:45 at night with his music blasting and 3 or 4 people outside the car and partying because they've been out drinking or they're doing drugs or whatever it is they're doing. And they decide that, oh, those houses behind me, they don't exist. You know, they aren't really there. I'm on the ocean. So they, you know, it's idiocy. So, you know, the drinking laws on the beach as a kind of a way to look at it. I always liked having a beer on the beach, but I was the first guy that voted for the proposition that prohibited drinking beer on the beach, because it wasn't me, the kind of guy like me having a beer on the beach that was the problem. It was the guys showing up from college or younger guys showing up with keggers and having big kegger parties all night long on the beach and getting into brawls and screaming and yelling all night long. I used to live on right near Law Street Beach Park, so we had it all the time. And you know, you've got to just dumb this down to the lowest denominator. Unfortunately, that's just what we've come to. So no, I don't think 10 o'clock's too early. I'm not sure that permit parking is the right way to go. If somebody said I couldn't park along in front of my house at night, I'd be okay with that, because like parking in the back, that might be a little bit selfish. But bottom line is that we need to take as many little bites as we can to get to where we need to get to, which is creating a situation where people can no longer behave badly in our neighborhoods. And whether that's an infield street, you know, 3 blocks up from the beach, or whether that's right on the beach, or whether it's in a beach parking lot, or whether it's along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, whether it's on Amafort, it doesn't matter. You know, we're left out here twisting in the wind because the police can't do anything because our politicians don't care. You know, we got Todd Gloria in office right now, and he's the worst mayor we've ever freaking had in this city, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't believe in enforcing laws. But it is what it is. We're stuck with them for another, what, 3.5 years. So we've got to find a way to make laws that that we can get past, that will help alleviate the problem over the long term. I hope that's what I'm hoping for.
Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. And it seems, you know, after discussion with the group, that permit parking, you know, it may not be the best choice. And maybe we need to look at expanding the parking time restrictions to other streets such as Cordova, Devonshire, Amherst, to, you know, and the streets along that map to see, you know, to get relief with the issues that you're experiencing. Delana, go ahead.
I just want to, first of all, thank everybody. But again, the number one thing, and Glenn just really said it, it's enforcing the laws that exist. It's the people who come to party and drink. It's already against the law to drink, to even have alcohol, an open container in your vehicle. It's already against the law to smoke at our parks and beaches. It's against the law to park on the street. And these people come and they park on both sides of Sunset Cliffs, even up on, I live on Cordova, they park up on Cordova and get into the back of their pickup truck or on top of their vehicle and decide to have a picnic, and they're drinking there and they're partying and they're turning up their music. It really is an enforcement issue of the laws that currently exist. I agree with and appreciate what Matt said about dividing these into specific one item, one issue requests. And as far as the permit parking goes, I would say that's really so far down the line, I'm not even sure I would put it on something right now. And if I were going to do it, I would say permit parking only, again, between the hours of 10 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, because that then because we do on Cordova Street, my direct across the street neighbors park on the street. We have renters next door to us that park on the street. They do need to park their cars on their street, but they live here and they should be able to. So I would do a restriction like that. And again, none of this is complaining about the everyday average person who's forever come out to Sunset Cliffs to surf, to walk, to just enjoy the view or any of that. This is very specifically about van lifers and the people that have decided that I can live in San Diego and not pay a penny. And again, the Port District, you used to be able to have unlimited time parking over on Shelter Island, and the Port District was able to come in and put time restrictions and paid parking, where paid parking never existed before, because they knew that people were living in their vehicles and just staying there. All of those people have now been dumped. And as far as Margaret's thing about other coastal communities, they have been able to do a lot more. I ride my bike several hundred miles a week, and I am in North County a lot, and I'm all over the place. And there's all sorts of signs and laws are being enforced a lot stronger in other places. I'll tell you, even in San Diego, Northern Division, La Jolla, they get that stuff enforced a lot better. We in Western Division, Ocean Beach, and our side of the point is really being ignored. So thank you for listening.
All right, so thank you for that information. If there's no other discussion, I think I have a motion to present. Nicole, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mandy. And I'll just comment really quick. I appreciate Glenn for being here and others for all their comments. I definitely think that this is a problem all throughout Ocean Beach. And so being at OB Planning Board, they have had these discussions as well with their parking lots. So it's really like looking at it as a dual effort, and really because it's going to have to go through Coastal Commission. They've actually been addressing their parking lots and looking for timed parking in their parking lot. I'll definitely say that I think it is wise that we take it into pieces, because like Matt says, there are different departments that are working on signage compared to striping and whatnot. I am not going to be a fan of permit parking, but I will say that I am supportive of a no parking on the west side. And I think that is actually just to be mindful of our cliffs and the issues that have arisen there. So that to me is like an initial request, and then timed parking in the parking lots. And I'd try to match that with OB, and I would try to match the request, a dual letter with OB that addresses all the parking lots, the OB parking lot, the OB Dog Beach, all the way to Sunset Cliffs. And I'll just, Joe LaCava has asked for more lifeguards. I'm not sure if that's going to be anything to do with that area and enforcement, but just so you know that council members are addressing that as well.
And hey, Mandy, really quickly, I just want to say that the Port of San Diego down at Shelter Island is constantly, it's so funny, like they're constantly monitoring those parking lots down there. So what's the deal? Like, why aren't we getting the attention we need in a problemed area? These cops and everything are just cruising, constantly looking at the parking lots, ticketing trailers down there during midday.
It's the harbor cops. They have the time.
I'm telling you, we got to call those guys up or do something.
Oh, no, they keep a clean
just
ship
kidding.
down there.
Oh, they're on it. Poor little campers roll right up. They're getting tickets because their campers are too big in the spots. It's like, gosh.
Okay. Well, I'm here to, I do have a motion on the floor. I do have, I've removed the permit parking because after discussion, I feel like that would not be a really appropriate mitigation to address the issues of the neighborhood. But my motion is to request more enforcement of the area on a continual basis due to the long ongoing problems that are being experienced by the tenants of the Sunset Cliffs neighborhood. My second request is the striping of red paint. I didn't really delineate, and I can keep it as brief as possible. I'd like to make a recommendation of possibly up to 30 feet on each side at the corner of Sunset Cliffs and Ladera to allow for emergency vehicles to get more room when maneuvering the turn. Also near the fire hydrant on Ladera and the storm drain along Sunset Cliffs in between Carmelo and Ladera. To expand the striping to promote the visibility of the area due to illegal dumping of sewage into the storm drain being observed by local residents. And then finally, to request to install street signage stating no parking. And I put it from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. to be in the same as the Sunset Cliffs Natural Park closure along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, starting at Adair and along both sides of Ladera. So the whole strip of Sunset Cliffs, starting at Adair, all along, and then as it turns onto Ladera, both sides of Ladera, as well as requesting Cordova, Devonshire, and Amherst, as well as all streets that are adjacent to Sunset Cliffs Natural Park that have entry and that have entry into the park.
Is this a letter that you're making a motion for?
Yes, I will draft the letter and have it distributed to the entire committee for approval before the next board meeting, but that is basically the request.
And who do you plan to send the letter to?
I'd like to send it to Todd Gloria, to our council member. I also have Gary Pence, and then as well as the Western Division. We have been working with the Western Division to discuss tools, and they are very much in support of getting signage because it can be used as a tool for the community members to use if they have issues. And then any other recommendations, Gary Pence, obviously, but if there's any other, I could even, actually, I will want to add the park council as well onto that, just as an informational to let them know what we've made for recommendation.
I just have a quick question, because do you know in Point Loma, any neighbor can go ahead and buy Point Loma neighborhood watch signs and install them themselves? Has Sunset considered this, like installing their own signs all over the neighborhood and along Sunset Cliffs that says, "We will call the cops after a certain time"? Delana, have you guys?
Yes, well, not those specific signs, but about 3 years ago, we reactivated our neighborhood watch. Our neighborhood, we took donations and bought, I think, about 8 or 10 neighborhood watch signs.
Awesome.
We put them all up there. And when our when Officer Cerwillo came to our neighborhood watch meeting, he spent the whole time telling us what it was like living in his neighborhood in East County, not in the city. So we really we've done a lot. And the neighbors, not the Sunset Cliffs Natural Park Committee, which has also tried to put forth requests from the city for a lot of these things. We've done all of those kinds of things, and we work together to call the police so that if one of us is calling, others will call so they'll understand that it's a real problem. We have, and again, Margaret, you addressed just how dangerous cliffs are. Last year in one night, within a 1.5 to 2 hour period, we had 3 separate cliff rescues going on.
I remember that. That's why I mentioned.
So it's very, very dangerous. And a lot of that is because drunk people are falling off the cliffs. And that's why just enforcing the substance abuse laws, dope smoking and alcoholic beverage would be important. The problem is we cannot get that kind of support. And my partner
What about privately?
like Diane Wendell would like to also address and just say just a couple of things. And she'll do
Diane.
Hi,
the sign
Diane.
up.
Hi, Mandy. Diane Wendell, I'm retired San Diego PD, also worked in the watch commander's office for 7 years. So know the impact.
Thank you.
The one thing about enforcing the laws, I have talked to parking controllers, and if somebody from this group, they would love to work a second watch hours and write parking tickets.
Right.
The ones I have talked to, they don't mind. They would like to have the morning with their kids And then, so it's a matter of us as a city to put that to the mayor and say,
Wow.
let's work those hours, because those are the only people, when we call the police for these incidents at the Cliffs, just so you know, there's a priority 1 to all the way to a priority 5 call.
Right.
Calls that we're calling on are priority 5.
Mhm.
Right now, with today's enforcement, those calls are handled a day and a half later.
Totally.
Radio calls.
That's what
And
I was told.
We in Western Division have 6 beach team officers. And
Mhm.
beach team comes from the city of San Diego, and Northern Division has 14. And we have 6.
Right.
So the problem with enforcing these signs just for the police is that when I talk to the beach team officers down in Robb Field, by the time they close Robb Field from 2 to 4 in the morning, they can't get down to Sunset Cliffs. They can't get down to OB. They can't get down to the others because there's only 6 of them.
Yep.
Where Northern Division gets all the signage and they get 14 officers. And I know you were talking about the Margaret, you were talking about the cliffs and the dangerousness.
Yeah.
Somebody should go forward. We have cost recovery on drunk drivers. We
Totally.
need for Copter 1 to lift off the ground when I was the watch commander was $4,000 to lift
Wow.
off the ground for a rescue. And so these knuckleheads might think a little differently if they get a bill for probably $6,000 now.
Uh-huh.
This risky behavior at the cliffs. However, that needs to be brought up through a committee to the city for that cost recovery.
I like what you brought up. Really important points. And
What would
some of that in the letter, Mandy.
what would it cost to have a peace officer doing overtime, roughly?
They are working, well, here's the deal too. Now, down in the gas lamp district, they have buku officers that just are back there. I have asked the police chief numerous times, why can't we get an officer down at Sunset Cliffs that just does that 3 to 5 mile radius and enforces the laws? Just like
Totally.
the gas lamp, just like Northern Division, just,
Mhm.
but for some reason, they're not
Odd.
into Sunset Cliffs.
Odd.
What about overtime officers looking for extra hours? And if the-
In answer to what it costs for overtime, generally it is, you have to pay for a minimum of 2 officers so they can be working together.
Uh-huh.
2
Mhm.
officers with their hourly for a minimum of 4 hours, their hourly salary and benefits. So
Ooh.
I don't know exact numbers, but you can probably go online and get that information. But in general, anybody buying overtime police officers, that's the rate that's given to them.
Well deserved.
Well, yeah.
Matt, thank you all for those recommendations. I just had a quick question before I go to Matt. Would it be appropriate for us as a planning board to make a recommendation to request additional funding for peace officers to enforce the area?
I was looking at, yes, I think that's
Okay.
great.
I'd like
It
to-
doesn't hurt. If
Okay,
anything, we get denied.
All right, then I'm going to add that to my motion as well, but I'm going to go to Matt. I do have a motion on the floor too. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to the last point here, the request to install the street signage for no parking from 10 to 4. It sounds like, we already have an issue where current regulations are not being enforced. So I think in my mind, it seems better to restrict this, at least initial request or suggestion, to Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. And, if it turns into a problem where like immediately all of the vehicles that had been parked on Sunset Cliffs are now parking on those other roads, then we could go back and say, okay, point to the city, look, this, kind of worked in this area, but now it's displaced it. Let's address this as another problem. I think for the moment, given, just the lack of enforcement and kind of the lack of resources it seems the city is spending, just putting more signage like that it's kind of like a large area to ask it to cover when it's already being underserved. I would
want to amend that last point to say just along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard for right now.
I agree and second that, Matt.
I
You as well.
I'd like to keep it along Sunset Cliffs and Ladera at least, because it's adjacent to the park. I would be willing to waive that. Delana, I'd like to get your inputs on that because I know you live along Cordova. Do you think that that would be helpful, or does it matter?
I agree right now, and I went back through some of the stuff. About a year ago, we wrote a very similar request to the city. And I looked for, and I was the one that actually wrote it. And I looked for the wording we used, and it was something along the lines of no parking on the west side of Sunset Cliffs Boulevard and adjacent, for the adjacent parks and beaches right below and all of that sort of stuff again. And we did it instead of specifically 10 a.m. to 4 a.m., we did it 2 hours after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise, because we figured that at sunset time, it usually takes a good 2 hours to get out of there. So being realistic is what it takes to watch the sunset and enjoy it. And then for surfers, etc., who like to come and surf an hour before. So 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. works pretty good. The 2 hours after, though, helps during the winter time. People, you know, even 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But the biggest thing is enforcing van lifers, the people living in their vehicles, and the drinking and the partying and all the noise and that sort of stuff. So I agree. I think you can address it in phases. If they come up onto our street and the other streets, then we'll deal with it. But I agree, Sunset Cliffs right now is fine. And even start with just the west side even.
I'd like to, okay, hold on, let me pull up. I can't stop. So this is where I'm thinking is that we request to install the street signage, no parking from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. The only issue with the sunset is, again, it changes. And I think the 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. would still cover, even with the time change. And that's what's being expressed at the park. And so I'm fine with making that amendment, but I'd like to see it all along Sunset Cliffs and up Ladera, because it's one street, you know, and then if they go up to Cordova or Devonshire, then we'll kind of whack them all from there, or try another option. But I really would like to see Sunset Cliffs and Ladera covered the entirety of those two streets.
Do you have a second on your motion? I will second that motion with the amended change it.
Okay.
Are you good with that, Delana?
So I've done it to request to
Yes.
install street signage stating no parking from 10 p.m. to 4 p.m. all along Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, starting at Adair and ending along both sides of Ladera. And then and then the striping of the red paint near the storm drain, as well as the corner of Ladera at the turn for visibility. Request more enforcement of the area on a continual basis due to long ongoing problems that are being experienced. And then to request additional funding for peace officers to enforce the Sunset Cliffs area. All right, so I made the motion, Margaret seconded. Is there any more discussion before we go for a vote?
I just would like to add one thing, and Diane just reminded me of it. I know somebody said they thought that a red curb around the storm drain was not necessarily the most appropriate. The reason why we are asking for that, and it is important, is when Diane has called it in, it's usually one of those things, well, we didn't see anything happening, and so they're not going to address the issue. We really do. You need to improve the visibility of it so that other people can see it and do something about it. The people are given way too much. And if you go around and look, that's one of the only storm drains that isn't somewhat protected, or, you know, have some sort of restriction around it. All the other storm drains have somewhat of a restriction around them, and that one happens to not have it. So it does matter. The city has really given a lot of, yeah, we don't care kind of lip service to that, to the dumping issue.
Thank you, Delana. Go ahead and I would like to keep these as one letter. We've kind of, removed the permit parking. We've kind of curtailed what our ask is and customized it. I think one letter will be sufficient at this time. So with that, if there's no more discussion, I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor? I can't see everyone. Oh, unanimous. All right. Well, that is awesome. We have a unanimous approval of that motion. So Glenn, the next course of action is we have to take this to the main board meeting where we'll present it and it will be considered by the entire board. And so that'll be next week. It's a Thursday. The agenda should go out this weekend at some point and you can register online. You have to pre-register for that meeting. And so that will be at pcpb.net. That's our website. And our next meeting will be on the 17th at 6 p.m. where we will consider this in a form of a letter of recommendation to be considered by our board. Glenn, you're more than welcome to stay with us, but I know you're busy. Do you have anything else to say or?
No, thank you for listening and appreciate it. And anytime you guys need to read a roadmap, come on by anytime after 6 p.m. The lights will be on. You can read it from my house. And but seriously, thanks very much for your time. And you guys have a great night.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. You have a great night. Thank you for being here.
Bye-bye now.
All right. Okay, so we're down to our first action item. Now we have another going forward. This was brought to us by Matt, at our last meeting, and I had seen it on Nextdoor as well. Two pedestrians were struck and killed right across as they were crossing Harbor, right in the area of where Pizza Nova is located. And so I wanted to bring that up and make that an action item per Matt's request and have a discussion about that area and see what we can potentially recommend for that street to improve the safety. So Matt, if you would like to go ahead.
He had to leave.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, 7:30, he had to get off.
Oh, is that what he said? Okay.
Yeah. You might have to table it.
Nicole, did you discuss anything with him about this? If not, we can table it for the next meeting because
it sounds like he wants a broad discussion on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happened was that two tourists just jaywalked on Scott Street right there, and then they got hit. I was at the gas station that night and I saw the activity.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if it's a very dark corridor right in there where that happened.
The other one was a mom and a baby stroller.
Oh. Let me pull up the map.
So was that a separate incident?
Yes.
Let's see.
Do you have that location, Margaret?
I'm going to pull up the maps here. Margaret, do you know where that other incident was? Was that along Harbor as well?
You're on mute, Margaret.
Oh, I'm sorry. She was the one Matt and I were talking about were two separate incidents. The one I was talking about was they were coming, the woman, I guess, had been walking from Harbor and couldn't cross over to, I guess, where that hotel is in, and there by Pizza Nova. And she got over safely the first time, but then when she was crossing, where the big issue too is in front of Better Buzz, that whole section there. So there's two sections that are really dangerous. The one crossing over from Pizza Nova over to across the street, not the Montserrat, but the other hotel on the corner.
The Holiday Inn over
Montserrat.
here. There's a Ramada.
I think it's more here. No.
So here's Pizza Nova here. We've got Harbor here, and then this street, I believe, is it
So
Scott?
it's kind of right.
I think she's talking about what might have been the old Vagabond Inn that's got a different name now.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
That
Oh,
it's called Seashell or something?
isn't that along,
It's on,
isn't that
Scott
right off
Street.
of Rosecrans?
it's
Scott
on
Street.
Scott Street, right next to Point Loma Seafoods.
Mm, That was
Emerson?
one instance, but the one where the woman was crossing was in front of Better Buzz, and the cars, I guess the stoplight issue is when the cars are going left and you're trying to cross Rosecrans.
Mhm.
That's where a lot of people have been getting hit.
Okay, so that, all right, so that's Rosecrans. Yeah, so that left.
One Matt's
out of
talking
that
about,
street-
yeah, the ones Matt's talking about is near the Pizza Port one.
Yeah, the Harbor Drive. All right,
Yeah.
we can definitely bring Rosecrans. I know we have that identified. So if you want to bring that on a future one, we can definitely add that, Margaret, for sure. At this time, I know Matt's gone, but you know, Nicole, did you have any discussion with him about what he thought maybe he would like to see there? Or is this something as simple as a letter requesting a traffic, you know, study or review of the area to ensure the safety of, you know, the streets and install any appropriate traffic safety mitigations to, you know, to ensure pedestrian safety and visibility?
So I have not had any discussions with Matt on this corridor, so I'm assuming this is in from North Harbor Drive from Scott Street up to Nimitz is the area of discussion right now.
Yeah.
There is a lot of foot traffic going from both the Holiday Inn and the Best Western over to the eateries along the waterfront. So just being mindful of what we've already requested from the city as a road diet on Scott Street to put in better facilities. North Harbor Drive has 2 lanes as well in that corridor. Does it need to have 2 lanes in both directions? That's a question for this group. There is a lighted signal there for pedestrians if they want to walk to the appropriate signal. I'm not saying that a lot of them don't. Technically, you know, I think Matt is really speaking on behalf of Vision Zero and traffic calming and the whole issue as a holistic thing throughout the city, but specifically this corridor, recommendations, you know, can still be discussed for this actual specific area.
All right, well, maybe, go ahead, Delana, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, and we'll probably discuss it another time. I'm gonna be a kind of wet blanket on this. There are in that area, there's 3 signal lights. There's one at the corner of Scott Street, there's one at the corner of Nimitz, and there's one pretty much dead center and pretty close to where the Pizza Nova is. Again, I ride my bike along this area frequently, and the road diet and calming things, they sound really nice, but it really does have a negative effect on bicyclists because the drivers do not want to share the narrower road with you. And they really do think that you are supposed to yield to them and let them just pass by you. And the other side of that, and I've said this at the Sunset Cliffs meetings, we cannot, you can't make people make good decisions. If they're going to look around and say, I think I can dash across this street and not use a signal light that's really within a couple of hundred, maybe 100 yards, 200 yards, you can't legislate smarts. And I really hate to, just because there was an accident, say, well, now we have to do something about it. No, we have to also train pedestrians to be smart and that they are responsible for themselves. And even Margaret, the thing you were talking about at Better Buzz, the only thing I would suggest on an intersection like that is request the city to make a pedestrian only crossing time. So pedestrians have a lead time to any other traffic that's going to cross there. That would truly be best when you've got 2 people technically allowed to use the same thing at the same time, then you create a conflict situation, but they're very different situations.
Those pedestrian walkways are working quite well throughout the community.
Well, when they get installed, however long it takes to get them installed. I have one over at the school and it's been approved and funded and they keep kicking it down the can. And it's right along Sunset Cliffs. So I would like to have more discussion about Vision Zero, but I think again, with what some of the proposals, you know, road diet, lane reductions, I think we need to have further discussion on this for sure. So I'll make a motion to table this to our next meeting, which will not be till April, because we have next month is our election and I am on the election committee and I won't be able to go back and forth and present any action items at the March meeting. So unless it's required, I don't plan on having a traffic meeting next month due to that.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Can we
all in
just make sure
favor?
can we make sure we add this issue like number 1? So Matt can have the time to discuss
Oh yeah,
it.
it'll be on
Can we
the,
just pushing it?
I think this is the first time he had added it, but again, you know, just because of the discussion, I don't want to approve something and then it be completely different what he's looking for. And then, you know, sometimes these don't always, they're not favorable when we take them to the main board. So I want to be sure that we have a full discussion on what that is. So
Just don't throw too
are all in
much.
favor of that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay,
Can I make a comment, Mandy?
sure, go ahead.
So I think in knowing Matt and what his intentions are is really to talk about Vision Zero and our traffic violence that is happening on our streets. So just something that was published today and new booted out was a crash data from San Diego Bike Coalition and their real-time crash data. I counted 10 hit and runs throughout our city since February 1st.
Oh, wow.
So it is, I understand people might be dodging across the street, but the traffic violence and the people driving our cars, and to actually know that our residents and our family and our neighbors are actually hitting somebody and leaving a scene when it can actually be life or death for that person is really appalling. And so looking at this as a bigger picture for the city and really, you know, April's pushing it, but you know, we really probably should address it as a budget issue for the council to hear in April. So just a big overall picture of the traffic violence that's happening on our streets throughout our city is just something really that we need to become more conscious of.
I agree. That is very concerning, and that's something, you know, that is very near dear to my heart. I have a personal connection, you know, with a friend being struck as a child by a city bus and eventually dying from his injuries. So Vision Zero is something that I feel is a very beneficial program. So I've already amended the agenda for next for April so that we can add that. If you think that it is something that will not, hopefully we can get it, you know, approved, and then we can, you know, discuss budget priorities, maybe ask that this be added to, you know, take higher precedence for the budget so that we have safer streets in our communities. So thank you for that recommendation. I've already added that as an agenda item for the next meeting. Go ahead, Delana.
I just want to support Nicole and what she said. And the hit and runs and the, as you're calling it, traffic violence, that goes back to enforcement. And that then hits a budget issue that really get the city and even go with the OSHA, I can't remember, but there's a group that supports Matt a lot and doing traffic safety stuff and paying officers overtime to enforce traffic laws. If you're writing tickets for traffic violations, people tend to drive a lot safer. When they know that there's little chance of getting a ticket, they're more apt to take the chance and because they're getting away with it. So I support what Nicole said. And yes, making it a budget issue, et cetera, is, I believe, really where we need to go with that.
I agree. I really appreciate all the inputs that we have. These discussions are just so informative. I feel like every time I come learning. I did want to share one thing with you. I do have, I want to make a motion just to move along our informational item because we're not going to have any more time, you know, any more meetings until the board transitions, and there may be influx with who stays on as our subcommittee, because whenever we do the election, we redo our committees. So I'd like to, we will address that in the future. So I really appreciate that. But I did want to tell you, there's one thing I wanted to share. So I went and met with the fire station up by Santa Barbara and Hill Street along Catalina. That was something that we had approved at our last board meeting to have the city look at and make come back to us with recommendations to make that area safer. And when I was speaking with them, I did find out, you know, with the road humps, that the city has actually designed the new road humps to fit the wheel well of all the emergency vehicles. So if they do have to transit over the newer road humps that are being installed, there is spacing in there to allow them to transit over the hump without getting humped, I guess. I don't know how to say that, but without gaining, you know, momentum there. But I did want to share that with the group as well, because that has been a common concern when we've talked about road humps as well. But again, it's almost 8 o'clock and we all are very busy doing things. I would like to make a motion to table the information item and just have that as an ongoing item, and we can discuss that at our April meeting. Can I get a second for that? Oh, Angela or Delana? Okay. And then all in favor?
Aye.
We'll go through the screen. All right, Paul's all in favor. Okay. All right, well, it's 7:43. We're good to go. Is there any more discussion before we sign off? All right, well, I want to thank everyone. I look forward to seeing you at next week's meeting. Thank you for your time and have a great night.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.